Welcome to So What's It Actually About? I'm your host, Margie Mkechni, and I, along with my wide array of guests, hope to help you better understand and weather the wonderful world of actuarial science. Hello, and welcome to today's episode of So What's It Actually About? I'm joined by Pateka, and our meeting was kind of a strange one in the sense that we went through a mentorship program where I had signed up with the Actuarial Society to be a mentor, and Pateka had signed up with the Actuarial Society to be a mentee. And we met that way, and it's been such an amazing friendship that's developed. So thank you so much.
And welcome. Hi, Mark.
Thank you so much for being on this podcast. And just your journey. I think you have such an inspirational story, and I'd love our listeners to know more about you.
Yeah, okay. I found out about actuarial science in high school. But I've always wanted to be a doctor. But
Nice.
come matric, we applied late for
Fantastic.
and you know how medical school closes earlier than the rest of the courses.
Yes.
So by the time I started applying, the medical school was closed. So my next choice was to do actuarial science.
No.
And then it then follows that I then go to the health space. Feel like I did have an affinity for health. Yeah. But so I went to WITS, did my actuarial degree in mathematical statistics and actuarial science. And then I did my honors in actuarial science. And then, I started working straight into a medical scheme.
Mm-hmm.
And then I did a few years there. But, I was already passionate about the job I was doing. But I wanted to explore other avenues because I didn't want to settle in just health.
Yes.
Maybe to discover other passions. And then I went and did a bit of banking.
That's when I met you, right? When you had
No, not yet. So
not yet. I come into the end later.
I went and did banking, and then I didn't like it. So I went to balance sheet management. That's when I met you.
Okay,
Yes, and this is at the beginning of COVID.
Yeah. Goodness me.
Yes, so when the COVID hit, I think my passion for healthcare came back to me because
Yes, of course.
I was in an industry that wasn't really doing much for COVID, and I wanted to sort of be, in the front line without being in the front line. So that's where my healthcare passion came back, and then I went back to medical schemes and healthcare, and that's where I am. And we met during this journey of me transitioning from balance sheet back to healthcare. And then at the time, I was also doing my fellowship in healthcare.
Yes.
So I think that's the other reason I sort of transitioned back to healthcare, because I wasn't getting the exposure that was required for my fellowship exam.
Which is really important, right? I think a lot of those fellowship questions, haven't gone through them.
The industry
First, you need to be in the space that you're writing your exam in order to sort of really add that sort of meat to your answers and that sort of element of oversight, which you don't just get from the notes.
Yeah, no, it was very theoretical for me being in balance sheet, and the questions I was being asked, some of them were simple, but simple if you were in the healthcare industry.
Exactly.
So so I did my transition, and that's where I met you. So I did struggle a bit with writing my health fellowship, and that's when I joined the mentorship program.
Yes.
To sort of just get more assistance in trying to qualify.
And let's speak to that mentorship program and that kind of relationship that we develop. Albeit that I don't think that our relationship is necessarily typical from a mentorship perspective, but I think an encouragement to the audience might also say, if you are struggling or if you're wanting to become an actuary, is it important to be mentored? And what are some of the sort of pros of mentorship that you've experienced? So not necessarily within our friendship, but just the pros of having someone who's already reached where you're wanting to reach, and how that's encouraged you and sort of kept you motivated in pursuing your fellowship exam.
Yeah, I think the best thing with my mentor is that you sort of provided a safe space for me to tell you how scared I am of the journey, and that it's okay to actually be going through this process and it's taking this long, because I'll get there when I get there.
You will.
But I just needed someone who understood where I was coming from.
Yeah.
And to sort of I think more than anything, encouraged me to just keep going. Yeah, I think that's what I took out of it the most. And it's also, I mean, we've heard a lot that studying is a very lonely thing to do. It actually is lonely, but to have a mentor right there with you sort of takes away the loneliness a bit. And to just have a friend that just keeps going with you, but also understands the journey that you're on. And it's always hard to explain to your friends why you keep writing the same subject and, and not passing it. But you don't have to explain yourself to your mentor.
Exactly.
Because they understand the process. So, I think for me, it's one of the best things I've experienced in this past few years together. I mean, you cry with me.
Oh, I have a word. I feel everything.
I cried in front of you. I mean, when I'm going through like self-doubt, you sort of helped me get out of that space and then just, keep going. I don't know if I would have continued pursuing the stream of mine if I didn't have your sort of reassurance as well. I mean, it does take a lot from me as well to just push myself to keep going, but it does help to have that extra friend, I think. Yeah, that's how I would sum it up.
For me, being on the mentor side of it, so part of the reason I signed up to be a mentor was that I had failed my fellowship. And then when I did pass it, obviously that was amazing. But when I had failed it, it was such a lonely space.
Yeah.
And I didn't sign up to a mentorship program. I'm not even sure there was necessarily one at the time, but I felt so alone in that space, and it's exactly what you were saying, in that people didn't understand. And also, as high achieving people, failure is not something we deal with.
No, it's
wow. Do you know what I mean? Like, and then I failed, and I think for me, I almost had like an identity crisis in that I was just like, am I useless? Like, and for me, that is why I signed up to the mentorship program, because I was like, I don't want anyone to feel the way that I felt. And if I can do anything to just be like, you're so much more than this. And I think, something I always say to you, which I think you're probably sick of now, is that it's sometimes you have to fight a battle more than once to win it.
Yeah.
And I think in the actuarial sort of journey, regardless of where you go, generally, regardless of sort of how that takes shape or form for you, is you are going to have to fight battles. And sometimes you don't win in the first time, and that, I think, is really difficult for high achieving people. So I'm so glad it's been an encouragement to you. And would you encourage young actuaries or aspiring actuaries to get involved in that space?
Yeah, I mean, just before I get there, to just talk to the space about your identity and having an identity crisis. I think that's the biggest struggle one will go through, especially with these actual exams. But because, like you said, we're so high achieving that your identity is linked to how well you're doing your exams. So that's the one thing I had to deal with, in that I was more than my exams. Just because I'm struggling with this one particular exam doesn't make me less of an actuary or so. It's just the journey that you go through. And I think mentorship helped me to go through that journey much easier. And I guess faster, because you kept on reminding me that, you're good at your job. You understand the work. You just need to there's something that just needs to click. But you're there. And if you need someone to believe in you in times when you don't believe in yourself. So, in terms of encouraging people to join this program, I think it's the best way, and to not have to go through the trauma, because it can be traumatic, especially when you're not used to failing. Some of us don't even study through high school because it's that simple for us. So it's an unknown world to us. So you definitely need someone that has gone through what you've gone through and understand, I guess, your pain and your struggles, and to just talk you through it more than anything. So I definitely recommend people joining this mentorship program, but only not as mentees, but also as mentors. If you've gone through the process and you've got so much to give back to upcoming students, and so I'm definitely planning to sign up.
You'll be amazing.
I just need to just win my war. And then,
one battle at a time. But I'm so glad you said that, because I think, often with mentorship, there is this big sort of push towards those who need mentorship. to sort of go get mentorship because you need it. But there is also, I think, sometimes like a supply issue with mentors, and I would really encourage qualified actuaries. And I mean, even if you're not in the actuarial space, like wherever you are, like if you can be a mentor to try and sort of foster those skills in yourself, because it's been such a rewarding relationship for me in the sense that I've also learned a lot, in the sense that, we've talked about technical things when it comes down to health insurance, and that's sort of that's the battle you're fighting.
Yeah.
But we also talked about like, how do you be mentally resilient? And I think in talking to you about that, I also was like, okay, Marks, how are you being mentally resilient? It's like, it sort of came back to me, and in some ways, like I felt you mentored me, and like it was definitely, there was a lot of give and take, and so it's something I would really encourage qualified actuaries to consider.
For sure. I mean, it's giving back. It's also just highlighting how your journey hasn't been useless,
Yeah, exactly. And how encouraging that can be to someone else.
Yeah.
I think, so often we're like, oh, my journey, no one cares. And that's why I'm doing this podcast in so many ways, is I'm like, people do need encouragement, and not everyone's going to meet the wonderful Pateka, but they'll be able to be like, okay, we can listen to her, and there's elements of encouragement that we get from her story.
Yeah. I mean, the best advice I ever got was to enjoy the journey.
Sure.
And I mean, it's a long journey, but I'm absolutely enjoying it.
Yeah.
It's looking back at the first attempt I had at fellowship and where I am now. Like, I fully understand why I failed the first time. And every time I failed, I've gone back and fully understood why. And as much as it can be a tough journey, sometimes the learning from it is priceless, that you can't take away from. And I think as a result, you also become an expert in your field. So I do see, the benefits of having to go back and just keep revisiting the subject until I'm good at it, that I deserve to pass it. So there's definitely learnings from it, and I'm grateful for the journey I've had, and I think it'll make me a better actuary for it.
Yeah, definitely.
Because I mean, the best actuaries come from experience and just understanding, how difficult it can be sometimes.
Yeah.
Sure.
And so, I mean, you've spoken to how you move from the balance sheet to back to the health space.
Yeah.
So now you are in the health space, and you are very much focused, and correct me if I'm wrong, you are very much focused on the pricing and benefit design. Could you speak to what is that sort of actuarial function? So we've spoken in previous episodes that actuaries price, reserve, or evaluate, right? And I think, to a listener, to an actuary, you're like, yeah, of course. But to a listener, you're like, what? So like, could you unpack like what is it that you do for a job, and what is it that sort of draws you to it and keeps you interested?
Yeah. I mean, so the end result of the process that we go through on a yearly basis is to get, what the contribution increases will be for medical schemes. But I mean, there's a whole process before you get there.
Yeah.
And that's, it usually starts with benefit design. And what that entails is identifying gaps in your medical scheme coverage, benefits that you would like to offer members that you think is of benefit. I mean, the whole aim is to make people healthier, and without obviously the cost that is related to healthcare. So benefit design is about finding those benefits that we can offer, but still maintaining the cost,
like affordability aspect of it.
Yeah,
which is a major thing in the healthcare space, right? I think something that a lot of people don't think about is that medical inflation, right? So the part of inflation that's directly related to healthcare is so much higher than CPI.
Yeah.
Right. And it generally sits between 3 and 4% higher. So if you think about that on like relative terms, if you think about it like with regard to a budget, it cuts into your budget year on year. So it becomes increasingly more unaffordable, especially if you are just able to afford it. AJ. Like obviously if you're high income, you are fairly resilient in that space. But I think it's so important to try keep those costs as affordable as possible so that people can still access that quality private healthcare in the South African setting. Yeah. So you're like you're protecting people left, right, and center.
And what's interesting also about medical scheme is that people only see the contribution side.
Yeah.
They don't see the benefits of it unless you actually fall sick and you need to go to a hospital.
100%.
So it's having to maintain